Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Namaskar. Welcome to Common Indian Voice. Lots of upheavals in the country, lots of anger, lots of distress, lots of people want, a lot of people want results, action. So I thought that why not, move away from politics a bit and let us meet a budding author. Today, the author we are going to meet is Mr. Arun Krishnan. Namaskar, Arunji. You're welcome.
Namaste.
And
Namaste, Isha-ji.
thank you for coming here. He is an
My pleasure.
entrepreneur, and he also has written his first book, which has been received, already published. So I would like my viewers to at least buy the book because it's an historical book. और हम आपको अच्छे से पता है कि आज हमारे देश में हमारी हिस्ट्री रीइन्वेंट हो रही है. जो हिस्ट्री को छुपा के रखा था, जो हिस्ट्री को पता नहीं क्यों सामने नहीं लाया जाता था, हिस्ट्री वाज रीरिटन and we are rediscovering our history, and we are always very thankful and grateful to authors like Arun Krishnan. Arun Krishnan ji, please would you tell my viewers the name of your book and what is it about?
Sure. Thank you, Isha-ji. Thanks for having me on your show. It's a pleasure and honor. So the book is called Nandi's Charge, and it is the first book of a trilogy. The trilogy is called the Battle of Vatapi trilogy. Vatapi is what is now called Badami in Karnataka.
Badami.
And it was the capital of the Chalukya kingdom. This was in the 6th and 7th and early 8th centuries. So it was the capital of the Chalukyas. The most famous Chalukya king was Pulikeshi the second.
He defeated Harshavardhan, right?
Yeah, he defeated Harshavardhan, or he at least stopped Harshavardhan from coming south of the Narmada river. So it's interesting. So this book talks about the Battle of Vatapi, which is a battle that happened between the Pallavas, who were based out of Kanchi, which is nowadays the modern day Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu. And it was between the Pallava king Narasimhavarman and Pulikeshi that the battle actually took place. But there is a history to it, because 20 years before this battle, roughly, Pulikeshi had gone and attacked Kanchi, and he had defeated the Pallava forces there. And so in a way, this was, but he had defeated Narasimhavarman's father, Mahendravarman. And so in a way, this was the son taking revenge for his father, on his father's behalf, against an old enemy. So that's what the story is about.
Yeah. Sorry, please continue.
No. So in short, the story starts off with the preparations for the war. I mean, you can't just simply go and fight a battle. There have to be other things that goes on. So if you think about it, if you just step back a little bit, this was a very interesting period in Bharatvarsha's time. Because in the north, so you had three major kings, okay? You had the Harshavardhana's empire in the north. You had Pulikeshi in the middle piece, so large parts of Maharashtra, what we call Maharashtra, Gujarat, northern to central Karnataka, some parts of Madhya Pradesh, all of that was under, and some parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Those were all part of Pulikeshi's kingdoms. And then you had the Pallava kings. Now, if you leave aside the kings and others, if you think about it, Buddhism was flourishing at that point. We had just come out of the Gupta age. So there was, Jainism was flourishing in the south. The south was a huge center for Jainism. Then you had the Bhakti movement starting off in Tamil Nadu at that point. So you had I don't know how many of your viewers might have heard of the Nayanmars, who were the Shaivite saints, right? And then you had the Arvars, who were the Vaishnavite saints. And so all of these folks were coming up from around the 7th century of the current era, or the common era. So this was, at that same time, you had Huan Sang visiting India.
Yeah.
Okay, so he had gone to Takshashila, he had gone to Nalanda, he had gone to Kannauj, to Ujjain, all over. He had gone to Kanchipuram, he had also gone to Vatapi or Badami, and he had gone to the western, to Maharashtra and Gujarat. So he had done a full circuit of India at that point in time. So this was a land which was in flux in terms of the cultural moorings. Lots of stuff was happening. And in that time frame, you had this battle between these two great kings. So that's kind of what I'm trying to bring out in this book.
Okay. So may I know what motivated you to write a historical book? Because if I don't think so, your profession and your interest is one and the same.
No, I mean, professionally, see, I have always been in analytics and in academia previously, and now I run my own company. But I was always interested in history. Not when I was a student, actually, I hated history because I guess of the way we were taught. You had to just remember dates and 1526, Babur, Battle of Panipat, etc., right? But I started developing an interest in history because I read a lot of English historical fiction, Ivanhoe, or Victor Hugo, the Count of Monte Cristo, and stuff like that. So I was very, very interested in history. Then I started reading up about our own history, and one of the main motivators for me was there was a great Tamil writer called Kalki Krishnamurti, who was a great Tamil writer in the middle of the last century. And he had written books on historical fictions on the Choras, on this same Pallava Chalukya, conflict. So I had read those. In fact, since I grew up in the north, I never formally studied Tamil. And I kind of taught myself Tamil because I wanted to read those in the original. So that was a big inspiration for me. And then when I decided to write, I thought this was, again, if you look at the milieu of that time, of Bharat of that time, I figured this was a great story that needed to be told. And also, if you think about it, most of the books that talk about history or historical fiction in India talk about the North Indian stories, right? About the Rajputs, and even Amish ji has written about Suhail Dev, Raja Suhail Dev, but everything is not specific. There's very little that's written in English from the South about the
not
Southern
only
Kingdom.
that, if I actually go back to my own school days, my college and post-graduation, I see very little, means if I don't choose Southern history in my post-graduation and all, I hardly have anything in that. Specifically you have to read about it. So, if you talk to most of the people in India, because I'm a student of history, so I of course know the names, but most of the people, they won't know who were the Chalukyas, who were the Pandyas, who were the Pallavas, and they don't even know how great they were. And their rule was also, not nothing less than the rule of the Gupta dynasty or Harshavardhan or anything of that sort. So I personally think that you wrote this book. This is really means something which is very appreciable, specifically because our history is Mughal centric. More and more emphasis is on that.
It's very Delhi centric.
Yeah, Delhi centric. It is Delhi centric, and
so
how many years did you research for this?
So I've been reading up on this off and on. I actually started writing this book almost 10 years ago. Okay. Not that I spent 10 years writing it. I started the book 10 years ago, and off and on I would write 10 pages here, 20 pages there. I wrote about 100 pages. And it wasn't getting anywhere. I had then suddenly one day, there was on Twitter, Shankar Shanuji was there, and he had mentioned about Garuda Prakashan. So I asked him, I have written part of a manuscript. Would that be of interest? And he said, go to the website and submit it. So that's what I did. I went to the Garuda Prakashan site, submitted my book, and then I just forgot about it. And 3 months later, they called me back saying, we've done the reviews. We would like you to complete the book because we want to publish it. So after that, I started writing in earnest. After that, it took me 3 months flat to finish the book. But yeah, and it's interesting. We were talking about South Indian history, right? What a lot of folks don't know, and Nishaji, of course, you as a student of history would know, is the influence that the Tamil kings had on Sri Lankan politics and the Sri Lankan kings had on Tamil politics. It was always intertwined. So you had the Tamil kings sending their armies to aid some Sri Lankan king against his foes. And similarly, you had the Sri Lankan kings. And this happens here too. So if you think about it, the scope of this book is from Sri Lanka all the way up to Ujjain and Kannauj, to Harsha's kingdom. So it pretty much encompasses, people say, oh, North Indian history was separate, South. No, it wasn't. Because if Pulikeshi fought Harsha, Pulikeshi also fought the Pallavas. The Pallavas were helped by one Sri Lankan king. Pulikeshi was helped by another Sri Lankan king, along with the Pandyas. Right? So there's a huge mix going on there. And I don't think it's as, isolated as we were taught in our history classes.
So, there are major four dynasties of South India: Cholas, Chalukyas, Pandyas, and Pallavas.
Yeah.
Right.
So the Cheras
Cheras were also there. Yes, Cheras were there. Cheras and Pallavas. So, means in your research and your own personal observation, which dynasty will you say is the best, or are they at par? They had their own times, ups and downs.
No, they had their own time. So the Pandyas were both the Pandyas and the Cholas were a very ancient dynasty. That is, they were found even 2,000, 2,500 years ago. They had people. So in Tanjore, in Tamil Nadu, there is something called a Grand Anaikattu. Anaikattu means it's a dam. Okay, it's a check dam. That was built 2,000 years ago by a Chora king. Okay, so the later Choras who came 1,000 years later, which is Rajaraja Chora and Rajendra Chora, they claimed ancestry from the same group, but it's not as if the Choras were ascendant all the time. So they had their period of ascendancy, and the Pallavas came up, then the Pandyas were there for some time, and then the Choras took over, and then the Pandyas took over again from them. So it was always, they had their own periods. But if you had to ask me to pick one period where I thought the Chora kings were the best, it has to be the southern kings. It has to be, in my opinion, the Chora kings of the 9th, 10th, and 11th centuries, because these guys, they conquered a lot along the east. In fact, they went up to Bengal. They fought the Pala king and they defeated him and all that. More importantly, they had a huge navy. They probably had the world's largest navy at that time, and they went all the way to Malaysia and Indonesia and conquered those.
Rajendra
Chora, Raja's son. So that would be my right. That would be my kingdom, and they lasted for about 400 years, and the Mughals barely lasted for like 175 years. Right?
But they are not mentioned, right? These kings are not mentioned. Like means the moment you said spoke about Pulkeshi, I was able to connect. Yes, he was the one who had defeated Harshavardhan. And like the book I had read, in that they had tried to say that Harshavardhan was not actually attacking. So obviously,
that would. So again, the beauty of writing a historical, there's not much that is known, right? Snippets of it. Okay. For example, Harshavardhan would have written of it one way in his, carvings. Okay. whereas Pulikeshi would have written it in some other way, obviously, right? So
Obviously.
from an author's perspective, you have to figure out if I'm writing the story from this angle, then I'm going to play up one of these, obviously.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
So it's a tough line. Pulikeshi, by the way, was a great king. I mean, I don't know if you have visited Aihole and Pattadakkal and all. If you haven't, you should. Aihole is like a university for temple building. You see so many small temples. It's almost like, from what they said it was where the sculptors would come to learn the art of sculpting, and they would build these little temples. So it's just filled with, there's a huge area filled with these little temples. And you have to come, and it's just amazing. So yeah. So that way I'm blessed that Karnataka, I'm in this region. So I know quite a bit about it, so I can write. And my fond hope is that, others who don't know as much about South Indian history at least get to familiarize themselves with these names of,
That is very
all said and
important.
done, these were great kings of our country, Bharatvarsh. So, just as I feel great pride in Harshavardhan or Maharana Pratap or Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, I'm sure people who read about this would start feeling that kind of pride in the Choras and the Pallavas and the Chalukyas, etc.
And ironically, I'll tell you, in my graduation and post-graduation, one of the books which was for Tamil literature, because I had South Indian, I had Tamil history. So the book recommended to me. Can you even imagine who was the writer?
Which one?
Romila
Nilakanta
Thapar.
Shastri? Oh my
Romila
goodness.
Thapar.
Okay.
That was the book, means I did it from IGNOU. So the book which was for guidance, it was not the exact book. We had the books of IGNOU. IGNOU has their own publication. But Romila Thapar, you won't believe it, I did not even complete the first chapter. I just left. It was so dull. And, actually, I love history. And like you said, that as a student, you never liked history. But I don't know, maybe it's God's blessing. But I teach history in such a way that children start, liking it. So I'm very passionate about history. And when I read such books, and I'm certainly going to buy your book. And I always used to think that in the history of our country, why is South Indian history, kept aside? Then when I interacted with others, I came to know that it was not only South India. We don't even know much about Gujarat kings. We don't know much about Bengal or Assam kings.
Yeah,
so
after this, and all those.
After this trilogy, are you going to write about others also?
Yeah, I have a couple of more book ideas already. I'd gone for a Tanjore trip towards the end of December, and because I come from Tanjore, my father hails from that region, so the heart of Chora land it is. So I have a couple of ideas now on books. Again, I think there are people better suited than me, more knowledgeable, who will write about North Indian history or about Lasit Barfukan. Where I think I can do well is write a lot about South Indian history, and that way, helpfully, people kind of start recognizing these names, and they can.
Yeah, if there is a writer, if there is a budding author and he wants to write on history, what tips are you going to give him so that the book is interesting?
One is, you have to be passionate about it, right? You have to really love history. You have to love the land and the history. I think that passion will come through in the writing. So if you are writing it as I can tell, right? The answers that I used to write in my school days were by rote. There was no passion in it. Whereas when I'm writing something here, I'm imagining it in my mind's eye. I've been to these places. I'm thinking of, Pulikeshi would have walked these steps, these very steps that I'm walking up. Or, you go to the big temple in Tanjore and you think, you know what, Raja Chola would have gone up just these steps. I was telling my daughter that, and she was like, oh, that is so cool. I never thought of it that way. So first is you have to be passionate about history. And then, of course, you have to do a fair amount of research. You can't just wing your way through it. You have to make sure, for the most part, it is historically accurate. The characterization you can do on your own. I mean, nobody knows what sort of a man Narasimhavarma Pallava was or Pulikeshi was. And so there you can do your own characterization. But you have to be historically accurate in terms of specific events that occurred. And then you just have to try and make the story interesting to the reader.
No, but then I have seen one thing. If you're passionate, like if I'm asked to teach a subject I don't really like, I do it in a half-hearted way. But
Exactly.
if it is history, like I teach all the SST subjects, but when it is history, I just
But see, Isha, I
love
wish
it.
you had somebody like you would have taught me history, in school. Because in what happens in school is people who teach history are those who are told to teach history. Acha, nothing else is there, you go and teach history. We had one great teacher. I remember in the 6th standard or so. And very young girl, I think she had just passed out of college. She was teaching us about Ashoka. So what she did, she went to so I was in Bengal then. She went to the Kolkata, the National Museum, and she copied the entire Ashokan pillar inscription from there. Came back and she made us all write that inscription in the script, in the Brahmi script, and then gave us the translation of that. Now, to me, if there was a teacher like that, people would really love it.
Exactly. True. So my last question to you, or I can say that your concluding statement, and I will really like it if you tell the people, specifically the people who do not know much about our history, why should they read your book? What will they learn?
First, read it as don't read it as a history book. To me, it's a story. It's a very fascinating story about a fascinating period in India's history. So read it from that angle. I think hopefully you will like it as a story of, think of it as a diwar between Amitabh and Shashi Kapoor or something, except that they are different kings. Okay. And what happens then. But more importantly, you will learn a lot about the India of those days. Hopefully I've done a fair amount of reading and research on it. So you will not just India, you will learn about kings in Sri Lanka, you will learn about the political situation there, what was the political situation in Tamil Nadu, in Karnataka of these days, the Chalukyas, Harshavardhana. So there's a lot of information that's built in, and you will get an appreciation for the history. So first read it as a story, but then I'm sure you will also gain a lot from it, from a historical perspective.
Is it available on Amazon, your book?
It's available both on Garuda Prakashan's site and on Amazon India.
Okay. And it is paperback and hardbound both?
No, it's just paperback.
It's just paperbound. So viewers, I will request you all to buy the book, and because you know what, आज मैं हिंदी में भी थोड़ा सा बोल रही हूँ, आज हम लोग उस पड़ाव पे है जहाँ पे मैंने जैसे स्टार्टिंग में ही बताया था कि हमारा जो हिस्ट्री खो गया है ना, उसके लिए बहुत लोग मेहनत कर रहे हैं कि फिर से वो हिस्ट्री को लेके आए, आपको पता चले कि हमारे पूर्वज कैसे। और हिस्ट्री को ना राइट ऑफ मत कीजिए, क्योंकि आपके रूट्स है, और अगर आप हिस्ट्री को राइट ऑफ कर देंगे एंड ये वेस्टर्न सब कुछ फॉलो करेंगे, तो क्या हो रहा है, आप ना इधर के रह रहे ना उधर के, आपका नींव ही कच्चा हो रह जा रहा है। तो हिस्ट्री बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है। एंड जिनको नहीं अच्छा लगता है, मैं सच बोल रही हूँ, कहानी के हिसाब से पढ़ के देखिए। जब आप कहानी के हिसाब से पढ़ते हैं ना, तो अच्छा लगता है। एंड जैसे अरुण जी ने बोला है, इमेजिन करिए, go to those places. I was very passionate about the Battle of Plassey and all. And जब मैं मुर्शिदाबाद गई थी, एंड वहां पे वो मैंने खंडर, एंड वहां पे मुझे जैसे बताया गया कि दिस वाज द रूम जहाँ पे सिराजुद्दौला को कैद करके रखा था, छोटा सा रूम था, दिस वाज द डैगर, म्यूजियम में वो डैगर था जिससे उनको स्टैब किया गया था। तो यू स्टार्ट कोरिलेटिंग। तो प्लीज प्लीज इनका किताब जरूर पढ़िए, एंड हम लोग नेक्स्ट किताब के लिए भी वेट करेंगे। एंड आई होप अरुण जी को मैं दूसरे इंटरव्यूज के लिए भी, दूसरे टॉपिक पे बोलने के लिए भी I'll be able to motivate him to come to our channel again. Thank you so
जरूर
much,
जरूर
Arun ji. It
करिए।
was such a
Thank you so
pleasure
much.
to talk to you. Namaskar.
Likewise. नमस्कार, थैंक यू सो मच।
व्यूअर्स, अच्छा लगा तो प्लीज लाइक कीजिए, शेयर कीजिए, सब्सक्राइब कीजिए, एंड यस, अरुण जी का किताब जरूर खरीदिए। बहुत मेहनत करके लिखा जाता है एक एक किताब, तो जानिए, अपने भारत को जानिए। गुड नाइट।
थैंक यू, थैंक यू।